Welcome to another episode of the Pre-Zero Sports Talk. The following conversation is with Haley Shapley, an author, historian, and advocate for women's strength and empowerment. Through her book, Stronger Like Her, and her extensive research, Haley has uncovered untold stories of women who pushed past societal limitations to redefine strength. I'm your host, Sid Bensalah. Today we'll explore the evolution of women's fitness, the cultural shifts surrounding strength training, and the powerful impact of representation in sports. To support our show, check the episode description for ways to connect with us. Let's dive in. Haley, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
What inspired you to explore the evolution of women's fitness?
I started strength training back in the mid-2010s, and I felt like everywhere I looked, I was seeing women lifting weights and getting involved in sports like powerlifting and CrossFit and Ninja Warrior. And I wanted to know how that had evolved and whether there were other points in history where women really pursued physical strength. So I started to read a lot of books about the history of fitness, but I found that there was very little content about women on those pages. I knew that there had to be really interesting stories of women who had been pushing their athletic potential since the beginning of time. So I started to set out to uncover and tell those stories.
Was there a specific historical moment or person that completely shifted your perspective?
I don't know if there was sort of one moment, but one that comes to mind is when I learned about the bicycle. And, I think I realized before I wrote the book that fitness means so much more than how much you can lift or how fast you can run. But I don't think I realized how deeply intertwined physical strength is with social progress. So one of my favorite examples from the book is the bicycle. And for people who don't know the history of how bikes came to be, the early models were really dangerous. They had scary names like the Bone Shaker, which had wooden wheels and was an extremely bumpy ride, hence the name. There was also the Penny Farthing, which was 5 feet off the ground. So in order to dismount from this bike, you had to be able to do a little tumble. And so only daredevils were riding these bikes. But in the late 1880s, the safety bicycle was invented. And this was a bike that, for all intents and purposes, looks like the bikes we have today and functions like the bikes we have today. And what ended up happening in the 1890s is that the bicycle became a worldwide craze. In the US, about 2 million women learned to ride a bike. And this was a big deal because it opened up a world of independence that had been previously unknown. Women could now go out and about without a chaperone. They could get fresh air. They could meet their friends. And so they started to dress a little bit differently. They raised their hemlines. They ditched their tight corsets because these made riding the bike harder. And as they were starting to get that little taste of freedom, it sparked the idea that they could pursue more rights. And so the bike is considered one of the catalysts in getting women the right to vote. Suffragist Susan B. Anthony called it the thing that had done the most to emancipate women more than anything else in the world. And I don't think that when the bike was perfected that anyone could have predicted that, but it did lead to social progress. And even today, we see that the more freedom you have to build your body in whatever way you like, the more likely you are to stand up against some of those inequalities that we still have.
How has your personal journey in strength training influenced your research and writing?
Well, I think writing Strong Like Her was really a great melding of both my personal and professional interests. I was able to take all of these things that I was learning about myself through strength training and all of these questions it raised and explore it and distill it for an audience. If I hadn't been strength training, I don't think I would have been as passionate about it. And I certainly wouldn't have had as many questions as I did.
And Haley, how did cultural beliefs like fear about physical changes in women or myths, something like about women running long distances, restrict women's participation in sports?
I think there was a lot of misinformation, like you just mentioned, that kept women out of sports. Even as recently as the 1970s, women were told if they ran too far, their uteruses might fall out. They might grow hair on their face or develop other manly characteristics. They might not be able to have children. So even when the bicycle was a big craze, like I was just mentioning, women were warned about something called bicycle face, which was this unseemly condition in which your jaw clenched and your eyes bulged, and you stayed like that forever. And the funny thing is that men didn't seem to suffer from this same affliction. I'm not sure why only women would get bicycle face, but this was something that they were, told to scare them, to keep them off that bike. So another little bit of misinformation that was very common in the 1800s was this idea that energy was a finite resource. And once you used it, you lost it. So it was considered very selfish to not conserve that energy to use for childbearing and child rearing, and to instead use some of it on exercising. So those are just some of the ways that myths were used to kind of scare women from participating in athletic endeavors.
Wow. Are there any, or I remember during our intro chat, you spoke about historical figure, and if I remember correctly, was Kathrine Switzer. If you could tell us more about her story and its significance in breaking barriers.
Sure. Kathrine Switzer is a runner, and she was the first woman to run the Boston Marathon as an official participant. There had been a woman who had run it unofficially before her, but Kathrine Switzer signed up to run the Boston Marathon in 1967. She used her initials because that's how she went by at the time. She was a sports reporter and went by KV Switzer. And when race officials discovered that she was on the course about 4 miles into the race, they tried to push her off the course. They couldn't believe that a woman would dare to run this marathon, that she would dare to run so far. At the time, the longest allowable distance that you could run in the Amateur Athletic Union was 1.5 miles if you were a woman. So, back then, all marathoners were seen as kind of a little bit wacky. It was unusual for men to run that far too, but it was forbidden for women to run that far. So Kathrine, she was running along with her coach and her boyfriend, who was this big shot put guy, and he pushed the race organizer off the course. And then Kathrine started to worry that he was hurt and they were going to get in trouble. But she finished the race. She kind of knew she had to, because if she didn't, it would show that some people would interpret it as women aren't capable of it. So she finished the race. She went on to become a competitive marathon runner and to open the door for women around the world to be able to run. She actually continues to do this work today. And, it was really a joy just having an opportunity to talk to her, because I think a lot of the things in my book happened a while ago. No one is still alive to remember them. But this is relatively recent that we had these ideas about running. Kathrine was one of the ones who was told that she would, her uterus would fall out, or she was going to get a mustache or something. And it's only been a very short amount of time that women have been allowed to work out for recreational purposes. And I think she's a great example of that.
Yeah. How have societal attitude towards muscular women evolved over the decades?
That is kind of what my entire book tackles. So if someone is really interested in the answer to that question, I would encourage them to check out Strong Like Her. But kind of in a nutshell, opinions have varied throughout time. In ancient Greece, the Spartans were very much in favor of muscular women because they wanted strong children in general, and they believed the best way to produce that was by having both a strong father and a strong mother. However, at the same time in Athens, it wasn't the same. The women really were confined to the home and not given a lot of opportunities to play sports or exercise. So I think when you fast forward to modern times, the attitudes kind of depend on what's going on in the world. We see that it was much cooler for women to be strong during World War II, for example, because men were away from home and women were having to do a lot of things they didn't previously do. But then when the war ends, you see a real push against that, and it becomes even less accepted for women to be athletic than it previously had been. So we see kind of these shifts, this back and forth. Today I think we see a lot more acceptance of muscular body types and just a wider range of body types in general for women. But that's certainly not a given depending on where you live and kind of what your social circle is.
Yeah. What role has the media played in shaping or, let's say, distorting the perception of female strength?
The media plays a big role in our views on anything, although I think that it is changing because we have a lot more sources of information now than we used to. So when I was growing up, we just had TV and magazines. We had other things too, but that's primarily where we got our messages about what women should look like. And today, social media, for all of its ills, and there are plenty of them, but it gives you an opportunity to see people maybe who are doing things that you would be interested in doing, or who look like you. So you can kind of curate your feed. You can seek out communities of like-minded people, and there's more opportunity to see muscular women, to be honest, because if there just don't happen to be any in your immediate circle, it's going to seem odd to you if you do see a woman with large muscles. And so I think one thing, we tend to think that body types or like preferences in body types are very fixed, that, we kind of like what we like and that is something that doesn't change. But that's not true. Body type preferences change very quickly. I think a good recent example is with the butt. Back in the early 2000s, you wanted your butt to be small in general. The most common Google searches related to changing one's figure were how to make your butt smaller. And now the most common Google search is definitely how to make it bigger. Yeah. So that is just, and there have always been communities that prized that shape, but in general, that is something that changed very quickly. And so for people who say, well, I don't it's not natural for women to be muscular, I don't like a muscular figure, that is just kind of a learned preference, and it can be changed very quickly.
Yeah. And in our days, do you believe the rise of social media, and we see so many women out there using different platforms, mainly Instagram and TikTok, to showcase basically the achievements, what they're doing in the gym, to boost the awareness and to push other women to follow suit. But in one hand, it's positive, but on the other hand, we see so many nasty comments and backlash and things like that. Why is it like that, Haley? Is it because we spoke about the past? I will not say the ignorance, but is it cultural thing? Is it societal thing? And it doesn't matter where we are. I mean, I've seen it here. I've seen it in Scandinavia. As much as we think we are open society, we champion equal rights and things like that. But still, there is this nasty comments, not encouraging youngsters to basically just be inspired, go to the gym, go jogging, build muscle, etc., etc.
Yeah, that's a big question. I wish I knew exactly what was at the root of that. I think the truth is that there's still misogyny in the world. We still have these ideas about what women should do, what women should look like. I think people feel emboldened, especially on the internet, to say things that they would not say to someone in person. There's so much psychology around that. I think there's less of it, though. I think there is more acceptance of women lifting weights, of women just in general sort of pursuing whatever activities are exciting to them. I think you'll always have naysayers, and you do see them in the comments, but I think you also see a lot of defending of people when that happens. So yeah, that's something we could do a whole episode about too, is why are people like this? And I don't know the full answer to that, but I think, we grow up with these beliefs about certain things. We grow up with all kinds of beliefs that we don't always even know aren't natural to us or something that everyone thinks. And it can be hard when those are challenged. So I think a lot of times people are just seeing their beliefs challenged and they don't know what to do with that. And with the safety of anonymity, they feel free to say whatever they think will get a reaction.
Yeah. And do you think we've reached a point where muscularity is fully embraced for women, or still there is stigma?
I think there can be a stigma in certain people, or I think there's still like how much is too much. I think you'll always have people who have different opinions on that. And I don't think we'll ever get to a place where everyone agrees on that women can be as muscular as they want to be. But I don't think that you would ever get to that place with men either. I think that there's definitely, ideas that men can be too muscular. But I think we're moving closer to this idea that we don't need to question women when they're choosing like weightlifting as a hobby. So when I was writing this book, or getting the idea for writing this book, I was training for a bodybuilding show. And a lot of people were like, wow, that's so cool. I want to hear about your training plan. I want to know more about what you're doing. But some people were like, don't hurt yourself. Don't change your body in a way that is unappealing. Don't ruin your dating life. Like all kinds of things that I would have a hard time believing they would say to a man. And even a friend of mine recently, he's an older gentleman, I was telling him, I was about to go to the gym, and he's like, well, don't lift too heavy. I have no patience left anymore. I used to when I started this journey, but now I just go into my full on diatribe about why we don't say those things. And I was just like, I could deadlift you. I could pick you up right now and deadlift you. Don't tell me not to lift heavy. I will lift as heavy as I want, because you would not tell that to a man. So,
you know what I think?
To answer your question, we've made tons of progress. Are we 100% there? Probably not.
Yeah. You know what I think? Most men, when they say something like this, they don't mean something negative, but somewhere in our head, call it whatever you want to call it, macho thinking, whatever. We have this, let's say, we try to protect. I know it's not right, but I think this is what it is. We try to look after, to protect a woman, or I think that's what it is. I tell you a story. A couple of years ago, 10 years ago, I've been introduced to a concept, unique concept, which is a desert rally exclusively for women. Never heard about, and I met the founder, Dominique Serra, a fantastic lady, absolutely a great lady. And she started basically explaining the whole concept. And me, being in the sports industry for, at that time, 2 decades, I've done it all from Olympics to hosting major events and stuff like that, and to pushing for and promoting youth development program, not only for boys, but for girls as well. We've done a lot of work. And when she started talking about that concept, somehow, the first 2-3 minutes, I pictured motorsports, and then she was telling me that is exclusively for women, and they have to basically do 2,500 kilometers for 10 to 15 days. They are not allowed to use GPS. They are not allowed to use their cell phones. They use only a compass and a map, And I said, that's impossible. And then I realized I was completely wrong. And then I reflected on that meeting, and I asked myself, okay, why did I react that way? So I couldn't, for the first 2-3 minutes, I couldn't picture a group of ladies, women, doing that kind of activity, at that level with less support and things like that. So, yeah.
Back to Kathrine Switzer, she spends her time in between the U.S. and New Zealand. And in New Zealand, there's this group of runners she's connected with. They do these long, multi-day runs that involve wayfinding with a compass and that kind of thing. And women are actually better at it than men. They're better over the long term in endurance. They keep their heads a little bit better under fatigue when it comes to finding their way. So it's interesting with, the sport you were just talking about. Like, women can be very good at that type of thing.
I mean, to continue on that, I was invited to attend that event, and there were around 140 teams, each team two women. And when I saw what they were doing, I questioned myself. I said, wait a second, am I capable to do what these ladies are doing? So, interesting. How did powerlifting, bodybuilding, and CrossFit change the landscape for female athletes?
I think, they've really risen in popularity over the past 10 to 15 years. And, I think CrossFit in particular has really been an entree for people in general to get into the strength training world, because it has little bits of Olympic weightlifting, of powerlifting, of gymnastics, of cardio and like obstacle course racing. So I think, because it became so popular and then people were introduced to it, they then went on and said, I really liked the bench pressing aspect of this and the raw strength. I'm going to try powerlifting. Or I really liked the finesse of doing the clean and jerk, so I'm going to try Olympic weightlifting. And I think this is when, these sports are about kind of being really strong. They're about power. And so for the first time, you're seeing women being able to do things that previously women weren't doing en masse, like pull-ups or carrying heavy loads or being able to deadlift 300 plus pounds. So I think those sports have changed the idea of like how strong women can be.
What impact have athletes like Serena Williams, Simone Biles, and weightlifters had on the perception of strength?
I think they've had a huge impact. Anyone in the public eye has a tremendous ability to make an impact. And when you see people like Serena and Simone, who are just at the absolute top of their game, doing things that no one has ever done before, it's incredibly inspiring. And, I think when we talk about women getting criticized for things like being muscular, you have to look at both Serena and Simone as women who have taken way too much of that criticism. There is some racism involved there. I think that is that's part of it. I know, like, when Simone was growing up, she was always very muscular, and kids at school would make fun of her arms, and they would call her a swolger because her arms were so swole, and it embarrassed her, so she would wear long sleeves. And Serena and her sister Venus have been the recipients of just a lot of gross commentary over the years, because they brought so much power to the tennis game for women. And that wasn't what the tennis world was accustomed to at the time. So, they've had tons of comparisons and to unfavorable things. They've had lots of criticism over things like what they wear. But I think ultimately it's been huge that they have been able to be so successful, so inspirational to both girls and boys growing up. And the more sort of representation that we have of women in different sports, with different body types, like achieving different things, the better. Because you can't underestimate like how important it is to see someone who looks like you, or someone who grew up like you, or comes from a background like yours. That is a huge motivator, just in telling young people that it's possible to do something that they maybe never previously considered.
What we don't talk quite often about, I mean, we're talking about Serena Williams and Simone. What people don't understand, beside of the talent, beside of the commitment, beside of the grit, beside of the mental resilience, what we don't talk about is how much time they train every day, every week, every month to be at that level, And it's quite pity. We almost don't hear, and I know that to be at that level, you need to train 42 minimum hours a week. And yeah, we don't talk a lot about that mainly in the media. But are there still significant barriers for women entering a male-dominant sports?
I think there are still barriers. A lot of things are still kind of rooted in tradition, this idea that if it's always been a men's sport, it should stay that way. But there is more acceptance. But I have gotten quite a few emails from women in really non-traditional fields, like free water diving was one I got from a woman in Australia who is a professional diver. And she said, everyone I work with is a man, and there's a very small group of women who do what we do. And this book has been really inspirational for us because, there are a lot of parallels to the work that they're doing and the sports side of things. So I think because I've heard, and I've heard from female firefighters as well, I think there are lots of women in that kind of first responder profession now, but just not as many as there are men. And I think they still face some challenges and barriers, but we need them to keep going, to open those doors for the others coming later.
Yeah. And how important is it for young girls to see strong, diverse female athletes in media?
It's very important because when you see someone who looks like you, then it opens up your mind to the possibility that you could be in that position one day. One of the things I wanted to do in Strong Like Her is show a wide range of women. So they all have different, there are photos in the book. We haven't mentioned that. So there are photos of 23 athletes in the book. I teamed up with a celebrity photographer named Sophie Holland, who takes really beautiful photos. And, all of these women have different body types. They all come from different sports. They all come from different areas and have different backgrounds. And I really wanted that to be a diverse representation of what strength can look like, because it doesn't look just one way. And a strong ballerina is going to look different from a strong climber, but they're both strong. They're both the best at what they do. So I wanted to show that. I thought that was important.
And on that, your book has deeply resonated with readers, with many calling it inspirational and a must-read for all women. What was your initial goal, Haley, when writing Stronger Like Her?
My goal was, just to tell the stories of I call them our muscular foremothers, but, the women who came before and allowed us to work out today for recreational purposes. It's something that's easy to take for granted, especially when you're like, I don't want to go to the gym. I'm tired. I don't want to go for a run. But the fact that we even have the option to do so is something that women had to fight for centuries. And putting the spotlight on them was a privilege for me to be able to do that. I also wanted to give modern women support who are trying strength sports or who are wanting to get stronger. I'm not here to tell anyone, how to work out or that they should do this or should do that. But if you're interested and curious about the history of it, if you're interested in issues around body image and that kind of a thing, then I want to explore those. So those were kind of my goals when I set out.
And if
to
a
write
young
it.
girl were to read your book today, what message would you want her to take away from it?
I hope that she just takes away that, she can do anything. Like, I guess the number one message I want young girls to know is you're stronger than you think. You can do whatever you want. If that's playing sports and developing muscles, cool. If it's something different, that's fine too. But don't let anyone tell you what is or isn't appropriate for you. Only you can decide that. And, you can definitely accomplish more than you might think you can.
And on that, I'll tell you a funny story. It happened yesterday. So we're having dinner, and my eldest son's girlfriend, we were talking about fitness, gym, activities and things like that. And suddenly she said that she's very weak on her upper body. She doesn't have strength, muscle in her arms and stuff like that. And we were talking about simple thing, just to use the body weight to develop certain muscles, maybe some push-ups, pull-ups and things like that. And one answer kept coming that I'm not sure I can do that because I don't have the muscles, because so yeah.
Even I fall prey to that kind of thinking. Growing up, I always got the message that women in my family didn't have upper body strength. And it seems true because I struggled to climb a rope, to do pull-ups, to do push-ups, whereas I found lower body exercises to be much easier. So even as I started strength training, I still found that my upper body was lagging. And just a few months ago, at the end of last year, I joined a pull-up program specifically for women because I've only ever been able to do like one pull-up, and at the time I could do 0. And I started really training it, and now I can do 6. And it really didn't take me that long once I started focusing and doing the right kinds of things. I think women have to train some things a little bit differently. A lot of it is about a mind-muscle connection. We've just never used certain muscles, so you have to sort of learn how to turn those on. But part of it is that it did take believing that I could do it. I went into it and I was like, yes, I can do this. And I did. And I love defying those expectations, even of my own. So yeah, absolutely. Your son's girlfriend can do pull-ups, but it might take some time.
Yeah, I will tell her. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Have fitness marketing and advertising evolved to be more inclusive, or do challenges still remain?
I think challenges remain, but yeah, much more inclusive than it used to be. I see lots of different body types now, beyond certainly what I saw growing up. So I think marketers are doing a better job. And let's be honest, they're doing a better job because it pays to do so. Like, they want more people to buy their clothes and their shoes and all of that. And being more inclusive leads to better sales. So I think there is like there could be an altruistic motivation there, but it also just makes dollars and cents to feature people, athletes in a variety of who might not have been spotlighted previously.
Let's shift gear and talk about gender equality and mainly equal pay within the sports industry, which is a hot topic always on this podcast with various guests. The U.S. women's soccer team fought hard for equal pay. What are your thoughts, Haley, on their journey?
I think their journey is really interesting because it's a clear example of women not being paid what they're worth. Usually the argument against paying women athletes is that they don't generate enough revenue to merit that. And, people who consider themselves pro-gender equity will get behind this argument because they say, yeah, I mean, if you're just not making the money, you can't earn the money. However, with the U.S. women's soccer team, at the time they were fighting for this pay, they were making more revenue for the U.S. national team than the men's side. They were selling more jerseys. They were certainly more successful on the world stage, and yet you still saw all this pushback in giving them equal training facilities, travel accommodations, medical care, let alone salary. So I think, in court documents, the U.S. Soccer Federation actually argued that their physical abilities were lesser, which did not go over well.
That
quite
was
the
stupid
claim.
to say.
When you have these, you have these like world, top of the world players, and they were able to settle the case in 2022, which was huge. And I think it's an important template moving forward for others to advocate for themselves.
In your opinion, what needs to happen for genuine parity in professional sports?
I think it's about exposure and just of course pay, and some sports are closer to that than others. But if you're never exposed to seeing a sport, then you're not going to value it as highly. And thus, like, the women's teams need investment. That's what's going to bring parity. If you look, for instance, at basketball, the NBA has been around for 50 years longer than the WNBA. It debuted in the NBA debuted around 1948 and the WNBA debuted around 1998. So the idea that these athletes will be at the same caliber is leaving out the fact that men had a 50-year head start to play professionally. And even more than that, because collegiately, women could not play a 5-on-5 game until like the 1960s, 70s. So for one, we need to give women opportunities to play these sports. They need investment. The NBA did not make money when it first started, right? It took time, and we need exposure. So we need these to be available on TV or streaming services, the games to be televised, that kind of a thing. I think in more recent sports, we often don't have as big of a gap, particularly in pay, between male and female athletes, because we would think that was silly, I guess, in creating a modern sport. So I think of CrossFit, for example. And CrossFit has issues, particularly with their CrossFit games. But one of the issues they don't have is that they pay men and women the exact same amount for winning the CrossFit Games or coming in second or third. And that's because it's a sport that developed in the 2000s. And if we had different pay at this point, people would think that was odd, but they don't think it's odd in basketball or softball or hockey. So the longer that women have been close to parity with men. So you look at a sport like tennis, where Billie Jean King was fighting for women to get equal pay back in the 70s. Now all of the major tournaments do give equal pay, and you see the talent level is higher, or and is closer. And that's because they've had longer to know they could be a professional tennis player and actually make money from it. Whereas girls growing up have only known since the late 90s that they could potentially become a professional basketball player. So yeah, lots to be done, but I think it's along the lines of investment and exposure.
I think we need more athletes, the likes like Serena Williams, Simone Biles, Caitlin Clark, and there is so many that are so talented, so popular. They inspire little girls every day to join a sport. When I talk about this issue, equal pay, with some guests, there is always one thing that keep coming back. And when I ask why it is like that, 2024 now, 2025, do we need regulations? Do we need decision makers to come up with some policies or sporting governing bodies to make sure that female athlete, based on merit, not based on gender, it's a right to have the same package, the same pay? And the same answer keep coming back, Haley, that women, they are too nice to ask for things. Not sure what's your position in that. But yeah, and the U.S. Soccer team, they had to fight hard to get equal pay. And they are the first, I think in the elite women history, they are the first ones to have equal pay like the counterpart male team. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's that women are too nice, although women are conditioned to, to be more polite than men. If you look at kids, often girls are very much rewarded for being polite and quiet and not making waves. But I think some of it, or a lot of it, is about the response that women get when they ask for money. The way that people responded to Megan Rapinoe advocating for the team to make money was not the same as insert, comparable male player. She took a lot of heat, a lot of backlash. And while many, many people love her, many people say terrible things about her. And I've even seen it just on a small scale in non-sports related contexts. When men ask for a certain amount of money for something they're, considered bold or just trying it out or whatever, And women ask for that, and people get offended that she would be so bold as to ask for that much money. So it is definitely a societal thing that we have to look at, why we feel women more put off by women asking for something that we might think is not reasonable than we do men.
Yeah. Let's go back and talk about fitness, women's and fitness. What changes do you predict in the next decade regarding women in fitness and sports?
I don't know. And that's exciting, right? I don't know what's going to happen. But I think that one thing I do talk about in the book is a lot of the ways that we evaluate athletic achievement is looking at stuff like speed, power, and strength. And those are all things that men happen to traditionally be good at. Of course, women can be good at them too. But what if factors like flexibility, endurance, and balance were considered the top markers of someone who was fit and athletic? We would likely think women were superior athletes if we looked at it through that lens. So when I was talking to Kathrine Switzer, she was talking about the future and like, what if our paradigm just shifts? What if new sports are invented that take more advantage of these traits that women traditionally are better at? That could be exciting, and it could be a way of showing that it's not just playing American football that makes someone a great athlete. There are a lot of other things you could do to be a good athlete.
Yeah. And what's next for you, Haley, in your work and advocacy?
I'm just going to keep trying to get more pull-ups, trying to lift, doing different things. I'm really interested in skill development. I think at this point in my strength journey, it's fun to be able to do things that I previously couldn't do or couldn't do very well. I'll continue talking about the book because I love these issues. I love digging into both the historical and modern day aspects with people. But yeah, I think there's a lot more going on now than there used to be. My book came out in 2020 in hardcover, and it was kind of the first of its kind. There had been sports memoirs and there had been other books, but after my book came out, several others in a similar vein came out. And I think that's a great thing because it shows that we are thinking more about women in athletics now. We are grappling with the issues more. There's just more awareness. So I'm excited to see where it continues to go and to be part of the conversation.
Great. Now it's time for our lightning round, Haley. Ready for speedy Q&A?
I'm going to try.
Let's do this. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Oh, easy. I am a night owl, a certified night owl, to the point where my next book that I'm writing right now is about night owls.
And let's pause just for maybe 2 minutes. Let's talk about the writing process, Haley. What's the most difficult? The beginning, the end? How do you get inspired? How do you do it?
I think the most difficult part for me is sort of knowing when to stop researching and to start writing. And that's not necessarily like a discrete thing where you're like, I've done all the research and now I write. I'm now in the process where I'm doing both. I'm still conducting lots of interviews, but I'm also writing as I do that. But it's really hard for me to feel like I have all of the information that I want in order to write what I want to, because you can always learn more. There's always somebody else you can talk to, another book you can read. I find that part incredibly challenging. I sort of want to know absolutely everything before I start writing a book, and it's not really possible. So for me, that's it. And then I think the second toughest part is knowing what to cut. In Strong Like Her, I had to cut about 15,000 words from the final draft, and I loved all of those words, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And my editor was great in working with me on that. But it's hard because everything I learn, I want to include it, and you can't include everything, particularly for a book. You're telling a certain story. And then it was funny, I saw in a review after the book came out, someone was like, she really should have talked about XYZ group. And I was like, I did in the first draft talk about XYZ group. I had to cut it. They were like, well, how did she not know about this? And I was like, I did know about it, but there were reasons it made sense to cut it. And so that kind of thing is hard because you're also kind of trying to future-proof your work so that people aren't like, why isn't this in there? Yes, so it can be just very hard to distill all the information you have into a concise, enjoyable, interesting read.
And do you do it in the morning or any particular time in the day? Or
Yeah, as a night owl, I write best at night usually, or afternoon. It depends sort of on what I have going on, but I tend to do tasks in the morning that require less creativity. So that's when I tend to answer emails or run errands even now, which is kind of nice because I'm full-time authoring at the moment, so I can structure my day kind of however I want. And so I find I do best when I'm getting those like day-to-day chores out of the way early on and then leaving the evenings for my creative work.
Are you a coffee person or tea?
Tea.
What is your go-to workout song?
Ooh, I don't know if I have one, but I guess the first thing that popped in my mind was Eye of the Tiger, if you really want to get fired up.
Deadlifts or squats?
Definitely deadlifts. That's my favorite lift.
Who is your favorite historical figure in sports?
In sports? Oh, no, I can't pick because they're all my favorite. I'm going to go with Pudgy Stockton. We haven't talked about her. She's one of the stars of my book, and she was a weightlifter on Muscle Beach in California in the 1930s and 40s, and she was considered one of the preeminent figures in physical fitness culture. So she wrote this column in Strength and Health magazine for a decade called Barbells, and Bells had an E on the end, so for the ladies. She gave a lot of advice about how to lift, what to wear and what your form should be like. She was super encouraging. Men and women alike loved her. And although they're all my favorites, she's who I'll say today.
If you could work out with any athlete, past or present, who will it be?
Ooh, I think I would like to work out with Sue Bird. She is a basketball player, now retired, but she played her entire career for the Seattle Storm, which is my hometown team. And basketball was my main sport growing up. So, I've always been a fan of hers, and I think it'd be great to work out.
Okay, a book you think everyone should read, beside of your book?
Oh, a book I think everyone should read. These are hard lightning round questions.
Take your time.
Let me think. I don't know. Reading is very personal. I'll just throw out one of my favorite books, and it is Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. It's a book I've read a few times at different points in my life, and starting when I was a teenager. And it always captivates me, no matter where I'm at. I think it's just a beautiful, sad book that I recommend.
What's one thing people will be surprised to learn about you?
I am very good at learning lyrics to songs.
Oh.
So I can hear a song just once or twice and be able to know the words to it if it's a catchy pop song.
What is your favorite post-workout meal?
Oh, post-workout meal. I don't know. I usually do something very boring, like just like chicken with,
So protein?
lettuce. Yeah, protein. I mean, the best thing to have is some protein after you work out. So I usually do maybe scrambled eggs with like turkey bacon, or I'll do grilled chicken in a salad with tomatoes and cheese and other stuff. Or I will do like grilled salmon with broccoli, that kind of thing. Or if I'm really feeling it, I'll have a slice of cake. I love cake.
Yeah.
But I probably eat that before I work out, honestly, and then have something a little
special
more
treat.
substantive after. Yes, cake is my favorite treat, I think. But I have a sweet tooth, so cookies and pastries of all kinds, I'm a big fan of.
Fantastic. Who was your role model growing up?
I think it depends on in what area. But one role model I had was my fifth and sixth grade teacher, Mrs. Hanrahan. She was just like someone who taught me to kind of be unapologetically myself. And she was strict to the point where I didn't want to have her as a teacher when I was kind of deciding what teacher I would have for fifth grade. But I learned that she was just like very disciplined and that it was a good thing to, it's okay to be a little scary. Like that's not necessarily a bad thing. So she was someone I really learned a lot from when I was younger.
Which leader, past or present, do you admire the most?
I really like Kathrine Graham. She was the publisher of the Washington Post after her husband passed away. She had been a housewife and did not have any experience leading an organization, especially one that big. And she ended up presiding over the Post when some big things happened, like Watergate, which they exposed. And so her autobiography is very interesting. And I think, I've always liked her story.
Fantastic. And lastly, Haley, one piece of good advice to our listeners on any topic.
Chase your curiosity. I think you can never go wrong if you are interested in something or have questions about something in digging into it and finding out the answer. I often go down rabbit holes too far, too many, but it's led me to where I am today, where I get to do this for a living, to take things that I'm interested in and explore them in great depth and share what I learn with others. And I think that all goes back to this curiosity that I've always had about all kinds of things, including my body, which is why I started strength training and why I've done things like, I've done mountaineering, I've ridden my bike 200 miles, I've done a triathlon, I've run a marathon, I've competed in a bodybuilding show. And those were all just because I was kind of curious to see if I could. So, yes, chase your curiosity.
Fantastic. Haley, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure diving into these stories and insights with you.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate
And before
it.
we wrap up, can you tell our listeners where they can contact you, learn more about your work, or just connect with you online?
Sure. My website is HaleyShapley.com, and I'm on Instagram at Haley Shapley.
Fantastic. And for our listeners, I leave you with a quote from Ayn Rand. The question isn't who is going to let me, it's who is going to stop me. This, I believe, reflects Haley's commitment to breaking barriers, challenging societal norms, and inspiring strength in every aspect of life. Thank you for tuning in to the Pre-Zero Sports Talk podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we have more for you. You can now watch the entire episode on our YouTube and Spotify channel. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Until next time, stay curious, inspired, and make a difference. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.